I remember my grandpa as a man of faith. He wasn't a perfect man, but he lived in relationship with a faithful God. Like some of us, he wasn't born into a Christian home, but he came to know Jesus as his Savior. And like some of us, he wasn't wealthy. In fact, you might call him poor. But he was rich in Christ. And like many of us, he faithfully served God for many years. His beginning wasn't too impressive, but he became a child of the King. And he learned to live as a child of the King. And he is one of my heroes. I would call him a hero of faith. He's a hero of faith. Now, many years ago, shortly before he died, he called me and he told me something. And what he said is actually hanging on the wall above my desk. But he said this. He said, "Be faithful, because he is faithful." And then he said, "God is near," and he continued on with some other things. But this is so true. God is near. This is what we've been saying the last couple weeks. God is here. He's with us. And today we're going to see that God gives grace, that he is faithful even when we act foolishly. And when we see his faithfulness, our faith grows. This was true in Jacob's life too. His beginning wasn't too impressive, but God gave grace. And God was faithful. And Jacob's faith grew. And so first, as we begin this morning, we see God displays his grace in the lives of his people. We're going to begin this morning in chapter 30, verse 25. As soon as Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go to my own home and country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have given you." Now, this is coming after 14 years of being with Laban. 7 years serving for one wife, then the 2 weddings, and 7 years serving for the other. And Jacob has fulfilled his commitment. He has worked to pay off the dowry, the bride price. And Jacob's goal is, and always has been, though, to go home, to return to his home in the promised land. And he is ready to go, to take his family and go. But notice he says to Laban, "Send me away and give me my wives and children." Jacob has been treated as an indentured servant. He's just a servant, not family. And so he's a servant who is working to pay off a debt. And even though Rachel and Leah are his wives, and the kids that were born through them, they are his children, Laban still claims them all as his own. But Jacob is pretty direct here when he's speaking to Laban. He says, "I served you for them." And the word he uses there, served, is often used for slaves serving. Okay? And so he's basically being right. I've served you for them, and you know it. I've paid the price. I've done what was required. But Laban isn't quite ready to let Jacob go. Look at verse 27. But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your sight," that's just a nice way to say, "Let me talk to you. I have learned by divination that the Lord, Yahweh, has blessed me because of you. Name your wages and I will give it." Jacob said to him, "You yourself know how I have served you and how your livestock has fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly." That just strikes me as so strange. Sorry, as I thought of this. He was given huge, huge gifts from Abraham's servant, right? But now when Jacob showed up, he had little. He must have squandered all of that. Anyway, back to the word. He said, "For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly. And the Lord Yahweh has blessed you wherever I turned. But now, when shall I provide for my own household also?" He said, "What shall I give you?" Jacob said, "You shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flock and keep it." Okay, let's stop there for a second. Before we get into the agreement, let's look at what was just said. Laban has been prosperous. He's been gaining wealth, and apparently he didn't know why. And so what does he do? Well, he goes to a fortune teller to ask why. The thing is God could have told him why, but Laban doesn't have a relationship with God. But he goes and he finds out that the reason that he is prospering is because God is blessing Jacob's work. God is blessing Laban because of Jacob. And Jacob's work is benefiting Laban because he's working for him. And so, knowing this, there is no way that greedy, selfish Laban is going to let Jacob go. He wants to keep him there. He wants to get even more out of him, so he wants him to keep working. And so he says, "Well, name your price." And it's interesting is Jacob first replies by confirming that it was God who has increased Laban's wealth because he is blessing Jacob. And this is a good thing. Jacob has recognized God's blessing and God's work in his life. And then he continues on to say that he needs to provide for his own family. Now, at this point, the only thing that Jacob has is his family. All that he has worked for over those 14 years is his family. And you know that Laban is not going to give him anything. Laban's not going to help him out just because he's family. But Laban asks, "What shall I give you?" And Jacob immediately answers, "Nothing. Don't give me anything." You see, he's not going to fall for that again. He knows you can't trust Laban. And he's not going to be indebted to Laban again. And he's not going to take anything from Laban that Laban could later say, "Hey, that's mine," and take it back. But Jacob will continue to work for Laban for an agreed upon payment. Now let's look at it. Verse 32. Jacob says, "Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and they shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later. When you come to look into my wages with you, everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen." Laban said, "Good, let it be as you have said." And so this is what Jacob is requesting as payment for taking care of Laban's flock. He will get all of the abnormally colored animals and that Laban has now and that are born to his flock later. And so we need to understand this. The vast majority of goats at that time in that region would be black or dark brown. And the sheep were white, the vast majority of them. A small minority of the goats would be varied in color, spotted, stripes, mottled. And a small minority of the sheep would be black. So Jacob is asking for very little here. And this is an offer that Laban can't refuse. See, normally a hired shepherd would receive 10% and up to 20% of the animals that were born to the flock, plus a percentage of the wool and milk from the flock. So what Jacob is asking for, just those abnormally colored animals, would normally be much less than that 10 to 20%. So then we say, but why would Jacob suggest this then? I mean, why would he give himself such a raw deal? Well, a couple reasons. One, it safeguards him. It safeguards Jacob because he can't be accused of stealing any of Laban's animals, because it would be obvious which animals belonged to who by their coloring. Secondly, and more importantly, Jacob suggests this because Jacob is trusting God. Now, we haven't read this yet, but later we are going to find out that God told Jacob in a dream that the animals being born would be striped and spotted and mottled. Jacob is trusting God. He's expecting God to bless him. So Laban, though, hears this and he happily agrees. But then look what he does, verse 35. Sorry, I almost went to the wrong chapter. Verse 35, but the day Laban, that day, so the same day they just made this agreement, that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in the charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. So Laban immediately cheats Jacob. He goes out and he removes all of the unusually colored animals from his flock. And then he sends them away to keep them secret so Jacob won't know about them. I mean, 3 days' journey away. Those animals were supposed to be the beginning of Jacob's pay. They were supposed to be part of his payment. But Laban immediately goes out and takes them. Now, Laban knows that his wealth has come as a result of being blessed by Jacob's God. But now, Laban is attempting to deceive Jacob and to defy God. Laban is not a wise man. But the bigger issue is that he knows of God, but he doesn't know God. He has no faith. He doesn't believe. He doesn't have a relationship with God. His heart has not been changed by what he has heard and seen. Now, sadly, this is true of many people. There are people who will read the Bible, even study the Bible, but they don't believe it. It's just a book. Or they read it and they study it and that's all. They just hear it. It doesn't change them. They don't listen to it. In case this is true of anyone here today, let me remind you. This is what the Bible tells us. We are all sinners. We are all guilty and deserve judgment in hell. But God loves you, and he sent Jesus to die on the cross to pay for your sin, to die on the cross to take your punishment that you owed so that you could be forgiven. And God's word says, believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved. Put your trust in him, your faith in him, knowing that his death on the cross paid the price for your sin. And you will be forgiven of your sins. God will forgive you, will make you his child, and you can live for him now and with him for eternity. You will have eternal life. Don't just hear that and walk away. Let what you have learned change your heart. Believe in Jesus. But back to Jacob. God has blessed him. God has kept his promise to Jacob. God's grace is on display in his life. God gives grace to his people. Well, as Jacob's story progresses, now, it gets a little strange here. And you'll see what I mean. But Jacob goes back to his old ways of trying to control or manipulate rather than just trusting God. But even though Jacob is acting foolishly, God is still faithful. God is faithful even when we act foolishly. Look at verse 37. Then Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar and almond and plane trees and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places, where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the sticks. But for the feebler of the flock, he did not lay them there. So the feebler would be Laban's, and the stronger, Jacob's. Thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys. I told you it got strange. So Jacob turns to superstition and selective breeding. He puts these sticks in the water troughs. Now, why is he doing this? In that culture, there was this superstitious idea, something that we would call an old wives' tale. They thought that what the parents saw, either just before or as they were mating, would affect the characteristics of the offspring. So what they saw, if they saw spotted and stripes, whatever, the animals would be born with spots and stripes. And so he used these sticks when the stronger animals were there breeding, because he wanted the strong offspring, right? And when the weaker animals were there, he would take the sticks away, because then the weaker ones would be Laban's. Probably not the most honest thing, but he's doing it. And so the thing is, though, is he's doing this, and this is just a bunch of nonsense. But did you see what it says? It says he increased greatly. It says, so he increased greatly. It almost sounds like they're saying this is why he increased. But I think it's just giving Jacob's perception there, his point of view. But literally it says he had an abundant abundance. In other words, he was extremely prosperous. He had large flocks, and he was able to sell or trade for camels and donkeys, and then he had servants. And remember, we said this a few weeks ago, that the camels were a luxury. Not everybody had them, only the very wealthy. So he has become wealthy. But it wasn't because he followed his superstitions. It was because God blessed him. And this will become clear in a few verses later. Look at chapter 31, verse 1. We continue on. He says, now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has gained all this wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. And so Jacob is prospering. This is about 6 years after that that conversation, agreeing that I'll take the spotted, the speckled animals. But Jacob is prospering, but Laban is not prospering anymore. In fact, his wealth is dwindling. At the very least, not growing. And his sons are upset about this because they think Jacob is stealing their inheritance. But not only that, but Laban himself doesn't appreciate Jacob anymore because he's not getting anything from him. He's not gaining from Jacob. And you can tell by the way he looks at Jacob that he's not happy. So things are starting to look bad, like not safe for Jacob. It's time to leave, and God tells Jacob to leave and go home. But God also says that he will be with him. In other words, he will protect him. Now, this is important because Jacob is still seen as a servant, as a hired hand. And if he just got up and left town, they could accuse him of stealing Laban's flock and his family, Laban's family. But God promises to take care of Jacob. Look at verse 4. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock was, and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength. I've worked hard. Yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted. And if he said, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock bore striped. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. In the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. And I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see, all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land, and return to the land of your kindred. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do. And so, first of all, we read here why Jacob was so successful. Why? Because of God. God was blessing him. In fact, God had told him that the animals that would be born with this coloring. Jacob seems to be telling about these two different dreams here at the same time. But he's telling his wives, he probably didn't tell them about the first one a while ago, but he's telling them now to explain what's been happening. So the first message was given earlier. And it was at the time of the breeding season, and this is what gave Jacob the plan for gaining wealth. But then the second message is more recent. And it begins in verse 13, where God identifies himself and says, I am the God of Bethel. And he tells Jacob then to leave town and go home. But it's clear here that God has been blessing Jacob. And Jacob knows it. Even though Laban has cheated him and apparently changed the agreement several times, Jacob has continued to prosper while Laban is not prospering. God is keeping his promise to Jacob. He's protecting Jacob and helping him. Ironically, Laban could have been blessed too. But he's not. Why? Because he has opposed and cheated Jacob. If he had been good to Jacob and treated him well, he would have been blessed. Now, why would I say that? Do you remember the covenant that God made with Abraham? And that is also belongs to Jacob. God says, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. God is again being faithful to his promise. But we see the beginning of a good change in Jacob here. He has recognized God's working in his life. And now he is trusting God. And not only that, he's leading his family. And his wives, they're actually following his lead. They're not just using him as a pawn in their struggle, their fight against each other. But he calls his wives out to the field that day and basically says, you know the situation with your dad. Because they do. And then he tells them that God has told him to leave and to go home. And he tells them about the dreams. He's talking to them here because he wants to know that they are with him and that they are willing to leave with him. Because again, if they weren't willing and he left with them, he could be accused of stealing them, kidnapping them. But they are totally on board with him and they are ready to go. Why? Well, they give a couple reasons. And their reasons are not surprising. First, he says, well, Laban, our dad, he doesn't treat us like family. We're foreigners. He says, he sold us and he's wasted what he was given. Now, when they say that, they're referring to the dowry, the bride price that Jacob worked to pay. Normally, part of that bride price, that dowry, would be kept in order to care for the wife if something happened to the husband. Also, and sometimes some of that price may have been given to the wife to help her set up her household. But Laban has just used up everything that he's gained from Jacob's 14 years of service. And so the wealth God took from Laban and gave to Jacob, the wives say, that's rightfully ours anyways. It rightfully belongs to our family. But the second thing is, the reason why they're willing to follow him is because they recognize that God has been blessing Jacob. And they trust God, so they are willing to go. So they give their allegiance to Jacob and to his God. And they tell Jacob to do whatever God says. So the family is all together in agreement. This is another blessing from God. And so even when Jacob acted foolishly, we saw his superstition, his manipulation, his lack of trust. Even when he acted foolishly, God was faithful. He kept his promise. He was with Jacob. And this is true. God is faithful, even when we act foolishly. You might say, how do we act foolishly? Well, we may do some unwise things. We may try to control rather than trust God. How about a big one? We sin. That's foolish. But when we act foolishly, God is faithful. He may discipline us. He may allow hard times to teach us. But even in that, he's being faithful. He is always faithful. And when we see God's faithfulness, our faith grows. Now, the last couple of weeks, we've talked about God being with you and about noticing how God is working in your life. And it's taken some time, but Jacob is now seeing where God is working in his life, and it's changing him. When we see God's faithfulness, our faith grows. Look at verse 17. It says, so Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. He drove away all his livestock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock in his possession that he had acquired in Paddan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And Jacob tricked Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him that he intended to flee. He fled with all that he had and arose and crossed the Euphrates and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. And so they gather up all their stuff and they leave town. But notice that Laban is away shearing his sheep. This would keep him away from home and working, away from Jacob working. And so this gives Jacob an opportunity to leave without Laban knowing it. But it also gives Rachel the opportunity to go in and steal Laban's gods, his idols. Of course, we wonder why she would want them. And there's a couple possible answers to that. One, it's possible that she wants them because it was believed that they brought blessing and protection. Also, there's some evidence that the household gods were somehow tied in with the family's inheritance, and only heirs had access to the family gods. And so it's possible that Rachel took them to claim her right to an inheritance. But all in all, apparently Rachel isn't yet monotheistic, following one God, devoted to only the one true God. But she's still holding on to some of her religious roots. This isn't good. But not only is this a spiritual problem, it's an unwise decision that will put her and her family in danger. Let's keep reading, verse 22. When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsman with him and pursued him for 7 days and followed closely after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tents in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen pitched tents in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs, with tambourines and lyre? Why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.' And now you have gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" So Jacob's running away, and he's making really good time, especially considering that he has all these animals now and kids, family, but he makes it to the edge of his homeland. And when Laban hears that Jacob's left, he takes off and chases him down. In fact, we're told he pursued him. Now, this is a military term. They're pursuing him with swords, all right? They're chasing him. It suggests they were going out to battle. He's looking to catch Jacob and to do harm to Jacob, even and possibly to take him back by force and make him a slave, a servant. But God talks to Laban the night before he catches up to him and tells him not to harm Jacob. In fact, God says, "Be careful." In other words, this is a warning. If you don't do what I say, it won't turn out well for you. You'll be trouble. There will be trouble. But he says, don't say anything, either good or bad. Now, this doesn't mean don't talk to him. Clearly, because what's he do? He arrives, he goes there, he talks to him. He's actually even very critical of Jacob. This probably refers to making a formal charge against, like a legal charge against Jacob, or pronouncing a blessing, as if Laban could bless him anymore. But God says, don't do any of that. It's basically a warning not to harm Jacob. But when Laban talks to Jacob, he acts like he's done nothing wrong. Like Laban is very self-righteous. acts as if he has always taken the moral high road. But Jacob, he is wrong. And he lists off his grievances. And he says, you stole my daughters. You see, he still doesn't acknowledge that they are Jacob's wives. They're his daughters. And he assumes that they were taken against their will. You see, he's so self-centered and so clueless that he doesn't know how he's made them feel. That he has made them feel like outsiders in their own family. And that they've already separated from him and aligned themselves with Jacob. And he acts like he would have had a party for them to send them away. Now, we all know that's a lie, right? I mean, what does Laban do at parties? He deceives and tricks. I mean, we saw what happened with Rachel and Leah, all right? He's trying to make himself look good and make Jacob look bad. Then he says that he could do Jacob harm, but God told him not to. Now, apart from God's intervention, Laban had the power and the legal standing in the eyes of those who came with him to harm Jacob. He probably would have made him a slave. But God won't allow it. He can't do anything to harm him, do anything to Jacob. But he does confront Jacob about his gods. But why did you take my gods? He says. Well, let's keep reading. Verse 31. Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. So first, he answers the first question about why he left, and now about his gods. Verse 32, anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have taken that is yours, and take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So Jacob gives a simple, straightforward answer. First, he says, I snuck away because I knew you. I know what you're like. He knew that Laban would by force take his wives away from him. And Jacob doesn't know about Rachel taking the gods, and so he's indignant here as he's speaking to Laban. And he says, point out anything here that's yours, and you can have it. But then he also says that anyone who has his idols will be put to death. So Laban goes and he searches, and he doesn't find them. Because we didn't read that part, did we? Where are we at? Verse 33. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the two female servants. But he did not find them, and he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about the tent but did not find them. And she said to her father, let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of woman is upon me. So he searched but did not find the household gods. Okay, so Laban searches and doesn't find them because Rachel is sitting on them. And she excuses herself from standing because she's menstruating. And he doesn't look under her. But there is so much irony here. I mean, for one, if these are gods, how could they be stolen? How could someone steal them? I mean, how are gods lost? And then these so-called gods are helplessly hidden under a menstruating woman. And they are set in contrast here against the true God, who actually is in control, who is protecting Jacob, and who has told Laban, don't touch him. So the true God is protecting Jacob, and Laban's so-called gods are lost, powerless, and totally disrespected. They're not gods at all. Verse 36. Then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. Jacob said to Laban, "What is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? For you have felt through all my goods. What have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. What was torn by wild beast, I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was by day the heat consumed me, and the cold by night. And my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night." So now, at this point, Jacob he lets out 20 years of frustration. And he just lets Laban have it. But this is a legal defense. He says, "I've done nothing wrong, but you have." And he says, "Where's the evidence of any wrong that I've done to you? But here's how you've mistreated and cheated me." And he lays it out. And not only that, he continues, he says, "I've gone over the top. I didn't eat your animals." Apparently he could have. "If any animal miscarried, I gave you one of mine." It's not his fault. He's not responsible. If there was any loss, whether his responsibility or not, he says, "I took the loss, not you." He continues, he says, "I worked hard day and night for 20 years. But you would have had me leave with nothing. No family, no wealth, nothing." And he says, "Everything that I have is rightfully mine." And Jacob is right about that. Laban is clearly in the wrong. And he could be charged, actually, with failure to pay his workers, which was a serious crime. But lastly, Jacob brings God into his argument against Laban. See, God himself knows that Laban is wrong, and he rebuked Laban the night before. God was not only protecting Jacob here, but his warning to Laban vindicated Jacob, showed that he was not guilty, and showed that Laban was guilty. So Jacob is trusting in God, and he speaks here with complete confidence. And he continues on, verse 43. It says, "Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, 'The daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters or their children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me.' So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, 'Gather stones.' And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jagar-Shahadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, 'This heap is a witness between you and me today.' Therefore he named it Gilead. And Mizpah, for he said, 'The Lord watch between you and me, when we are out of one another's sight. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives beside my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me.' Then Laban said to Jacob, 'See this heap and the pillar which I have set between you and me? This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me to do harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us.' So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. And Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned home. So what we see here is Laban knows he's wrong. He knows he can't make any legitimate argument or legal defense, but he's still trying to save face. He says, like a little kid, well, it's all mine. the daughters, the animals, everything, it's all mine. And then, still trying to save face, he acts like he's in control and asks for a covenant, a treaty between them. But in reality, he knows that he has lost the legal battle, and he's afraid of Jacob retaliating. And so he wants a treaty. So this treaty is promising not to fight each other, to stay on their own side of that heap of rocks. But he also tells Jacob not to mistreat his daughters, which I think is ironic coming from him. But they make this treaty, and Jacob actually takes the lead here. He is now the greater of the two of them. And they set up stones as a memorial of the treaty, and they swear by their gods. Actually, Laban swears by both his God and Jacob's God. The verb there when he says, let our gods judge, is plural. And so he's swearing by both the gods. But Jacob only swears by the one true God. And he calls him the fear of Isaac. Now, this is the only place that God is called the fear of Isaac. It means Isaac's God who inspires fear. Laban is afraid of him. But what's most significant in this is that Jacob has now fully committed himself to the one true God, the God of his father Isaac. Jacob has finally recognized God's working in his life, and he is acting like a man of faith. He saw God's faithfulness, and it changed him. His faith grew. Jacob was able to trust God and obey God and to lead his family. And he gave God the credit for all of his prosperity. He knows that he would have nothing apart from God. He's living like a man of faith. He's still not perfect, but he's growing. Now, last week I asked, how is God working in your life? And I asked if you could answer the question. Can you answer? Have you seen it? When you understand who God is and you see his faithfulness, your faith will grow. You will be able to trust him more, and you will be able to obey him. Right now, God is giving grace to his people because he is faithful. Now, you may or may not have great faith. In fact, maybe you'd like to have stronger faith, like the disciples who, after hearing Jesus teach about something difficult, said to him, "Increase our faith." But every hero of the faith started somewhere and grew. None of them were perfect. Not the 12 disciples, not Jacob, not my grandpa. But our God is always faithful. And if you are a child of God, if you are a follower of Jesus, then you have what it takes to be a person of great faith. You can be a person of great faith. When we follow him, when we see his faithfulness, when we spend time with him and draw near to him, we grow. He gives grace. He is faithful. So be faithful because he is faithful.